My name is Ben White, Senior Talent Acquisition Consultant at Titus Talent, and I'm next on the RecTech podcast.
And welcome back to RecTech, the Recruiting Technology Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Russell. Battling a cold today. I'm a consultant who helps job boards and HR tech vendors with strategy and marketing. So the goal of this show is to highlight interesting recruiting technologies out there, as well as talking with recruiters on how they use technology to do their jobs and recruit every day. First, the RecTech podcast is now sponsored by Jobs2Careers. Jobs2Careers is the leading programmatic marketplace to find talent. Using predictive analytics, the company enables recruiters to estimate the cost and applicant volume they can expect and only pay for completed applications. Jobs2Careers' mission is to innovate the way talent effectively finds work and work finds talent. For more info, go to jobs2careers.com/employers. All right, on to our guest. Ben White has 7 years of experience in talent acquisition. He's worked as a headhunter, corporate recruiter, and today he's part of the recruitment process InSourcing team at Titus Talent, a talent strategies firm with several offices throughout the Midwest, New York, and the UK. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to our discussion today. So I've heard of recruitment process outsourcing, RPO. What is recruitment process insourcing? Because I haven't heard that term yet.
Yeah, it's really a very unique and new model. And recruitment process insourcing is just kind of a way for us to brand how we kind of differentiate. So the idea is insourcing is you have a dedicated headhunter on your team. That's basically the idea. Mm-hmm. When we get a client, it's a little bit different. I'm going to back up just a little bit. We work in the same space as contingent recruiters and headhunters. But what really differentiates us is two things, and it's why we end up calling it insourcing. So the first major thing is that we do not receive any contingent fee when we fill a role. Rather, we charge kind of on an hourly basis. The second thing is we never post any roles. Every single candidate we ever talk to is somebody that we went out and sourced in the market. Mm-hmm. So even if I wanted to post a role so people would come in and apply and it would be a little bit easier, we don't have the mechanisms in place to do so. And that's part of our model.
Okay. Let's unpack that for a second. So what's the strategy behind that? Because that's kind of different than a lot of recruiters out there. I mean, most people post jobs online and also use that to proactively get talent in the door. But why only sourcing as your main?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess for us, it's just a point of differentiation. I think when you talk to a potential client and you say, hey, every single person we ever talk to is passive, you're really adding value. And that's why we call it insourcing. It's because it's like you have a dedicated headhunter in your staff. You don't have to pay us when the role gets filled. You're paying hourly along the way as if we were a part of your staff. So that's why it's called insourcing, because we literally are like part of the team. One of the other ways that we kind of differentiate ourselves is that we do weekly meetings and weekly reports, so we can kind of quantify what we've done with those, the dedicated hours that we spent on the on the role. We do 10 hours a week on one role, so you get a dedicated headhunter doing 10 hours on just one role. Mm-hmm. But we put together a database of every candidate we ever source. So we'll go out there and we'll build a pipeline, and then we'll put all those people, we'll put them into an Excel spreadsheet with a hyperlink to their LinkedIn profile or wherever you found them, as well as their contact information, what they do, their current title. So that's all in a spreadsheet. So when we fill a role, and not only do we end up filling the role for the company, but they get a giant database of every candidate that's kind of qualified for the role that we've reached out to that they can use down the road. If they have another position like that, if they hire a mechanical engineer with us, and 6 months down the line, they can pull up that spreadsheet and they can look through 80 other mechanical engineers in a 25-mile radius that fit what they do. Mm-hmm. And then they can hire them for free. There's never a fee associated with it. You could theoretically hire. If you get an 80-person list of mechanical engineers, you hire one of them, 6 months later, you could theoretically hire 79 and never owe us another cent.
Yeah.
So that's why, and that's a long-winded explanation, but basically our model is that it's almost like having a dedicated headhunter on your team. And that's why we call it InSourcing.
Okay, yeah, you're a sourcer for hire. So what's the typical cost for this per hour?
Yeah, so the cost per hour, it's about $1,100 a week, because if we're working on one role for a company, we have an engagement manager who manages the relationship, does kind of the high-level stuff, and then you have a dedicated recruiter. So the recruiter is going to spend 10 hours. You're going to get about 2 hours out of the engagement manager, who's just going to kind of handle, like I said, the high-level stuff. And that's going to cost you about $1,100 a week. Our average fill time is about 8 weeks. So the average spend is around $9,000. Most of the roles we fill are around $80K. Mm-hmm. So you spend $9,000 as opposed to $20,000 with a typical headhunter or typical contingent firm. Okay. So the value is quite ridiculous, actually. I placed a role with a client of mine in Milwaukee, and I filled the role in 4 weeks. So they spent $4,500 on it. The role was a senior project leader, which is basically just a really high-level project manager. And the salary was $120K. If I was at Manpower still, they would have owed my company $27,000. But because I'm with Titus Talent, they end up paying like $4,500 for that fill.
Yeah, it's definitely much more cost effective, I think. So, what's a typical day like for you? What time do you get in? What's kind of the first thing on your plate in the morning?
Yeah, so I'm an early riser. So I like to start working at around 6:30 or 7. I think the day varies day to day, but my days are all a mix of sourcing candidates. Again, nobody applies, so I spend a lot of time sourcing, interviewing those candidates and having those sort of exploratory conversations when they first, respond and when we connect. Weekly meetings. In my company, we work 4 jobs total at any one given time, because we do 10 hours in each role. Mm-hmm. So we've got 4 meetings a week, and we meet with the client on a weekly basis, and that's a 30-minute or 1-hour meeting. So that's part of it too. And then the other thing that makes up about 4 or 5 hours of my week is building together those reports and just saying, this is what we did this week. This is how we spent that 10 hours. Here are the results. Here are the candidates we have in dialogue. Here's somebody we've interviewed and are ready to submit. And here's what we're seeing in the market. We're seeing that a lot of people have this perception of your company, or perhaps the salary is a little low. So that's kind of how I spend my day: sourcing, talking to candidates, meeting with clients, and then creating those reports for the clients just to let them know how they're spending their money.
What's the key to sourcing for you, do you think?
I think the key to sourcing happens in the very first conversation with a client. I think if you mess that up, you're never going to be able to source effectively. So you have to know what the absolute musts are, the things that they have to have in order to be able to hire them. Because those little pieces of information right there are how you build your Boolean string. That's how you build your search. And if you don't have exactly what they're looking for, you're never going to be able to search effectively. So I think the first conversation, getting a really good grasp of what they're looking for, what that person might be called elsewhere, and finding what they absolutely need so you can build the biggest possible funnel, I think that's key. And I think it's also key to learn how you can sell the role and the company. There's a lot of easy companies to sell. I work with a lot of great companies that have a really attractive story. But I think sometimes they don't give you a way to sell the role. Every candidate I ever talk to is passive. They're not looking for a job. Mm-hmm. So when I talk to a client, I say, what can I tell somebody about this job that'll make them want to leave their job and come and do it for you? Somebody who's not looking, somebody who's happy coming to work Monday through Friday. Yep. So I think it's important that you can tell a good story. So build the largest possible funnel of qualified candidates, be able to tell a great, enticing story about why listening about this opportunity is worth their time. And then you have to be able to write effective messages. You have to be able to convey that in a way that's going to motivate people to spend 5 minutes on the phone with you. I found that if I can get people to respond and I can get people to get on the phone with me, a lot of those people are going to be converted into applicants. Yeah. But it's getting those people engaged initially is the biggest challenge, I think. And you put yourself in the best position by building the largest funnel of qualified applicants, writing an enticing message with a great story, and then trying to get them on the phone. And that's kind of how I found success.
Okay, and I want to get into more of that detail with you as well in this interview. First, you don't use an ATS, correct?
No, we do not.
Okay, so you keep track candidates in the spreadsheet, I think you said. What other tools, though, are you using as part of your day-to-day recruiting, though? You must be using other stuff to help you with sourcing.
Yeah, totally. I would say a large portion of it is LinkedIn. I'm very active on there. I've got a pretty large network, and I've got a LinkedIn recruiter seat like most recruiters do. So, we keep track of a lot of the candidates by building projects in LinkedIn, as well as exporting them to the spreadsheets. In addition to that, we have seats on Monster to go out there for certain jobs. It might be a little bit easier to find people there. I use Indeed. It's a giant database. I'm also AIR certified, so I've got Boolean strings that I kind of save and I go to just to kind of punch into Google and pull people up. I do a lot of technology sources or searches. So a lot of the candidates that I'm looking for have their own website. If you're looking for computer science professionals, a lot of them have places. You can find them elsewhere. And just by punching the right search strings into Google, you can find a lot of them and find their direct emails and reach out to them that way.
Yeah. Do you use any Chrome extensions, any of the other people search engines out there as well?
I don't. I've dabbled before, but not currently. I pretty much just use Google to search if I'm not in one of the databases or LinkedIn.
Okay. Let's talk about LinkedIn then. Talk to me about effective in-mail writing, and also what's your current response rate from in-mails?
So my response rate is just under 40%. I'm going to say that with a caveat, though. I get about 40% response rates from a 3-message stack that I do. So for every search that I have, I've got 3 different messages I'm going to send out, and I do one on the first day that I source, one week later, and then another 1 week following that. And through all 3 of those, through that series of in-mails, about 40% of the people respond to me in some way, shape, or form. So the first one is just...
So you hit the candidate 3 times?
I do.
Okay.
Unless they respond. If someone declines my message, I'm not going to send them another message. But if I send somebody a message and they do not respond, they're going to get a second message. And if they don't respond, then they're going to get a third message. And each one is different.
Okay, so what does take me through a typical email from you, kind of the first, second, and third ones. What's the subject line say, and what's inside the message?
Yeah, so typically the subject line is going to be something enticing about the role, or something enticing about the company. So I had a client who just built a $35 million addition to their headquarters recently. So one of the subject lines I wrote for one of the emails that I sent out to a bunch of candidates was, industry leader building $35 million addition to headquarters needs your project leadership on a global scale. I believe it's something like that, maybe like a tiny bit shorter.
Yeah.
But it's usually something that's kind of pitching the role almost a little commercially. And that's one of the things that I picked up when I did training with Lou Adler. He actually trained a bunch of people in my company, but I kind of use a lot of what he does for my first in-mail. So there's that kind of enticing pitch headline, and then I go through there in the subject, and I kind of sell the opportunity a little bit. So I sell, this is why it's exciting. This is the impact. And there's a few things I stress in my typical in-mail. I stress that it's going to be confidential. I stress that it's going to be quick. I try to stress that it's about them. A lot of times in my in-mails too, I'll write personal things. I'll find stuff on their LinkedIn profile that's unique to them. So they know that there's absolutely no way this is a standard generic message, that I did view them and I am specifically interested in them. So that would be a standard first in-mail. The second one a week later, this is to everybody who has not applied to me. The subject line is second attempt to reach you, ! I think there's something just about saying, hey, I've tried to reach you before, it was unsuccessful, and I'm trying again, that motivates people to respond. In that message, I write something along the lines of, hey, I messaged you about a week ago. I haven't heard back, so I wanted to try to reach out again. We've started moving forward in the process with other candidates, but I know that my hiring managers would have interested you, so I'd love to have a quick confidential chat if you get a minute. You can reach me at, and I give my phone number or email.
Yeah.
So what I think works about that is there is just something innately human to say, oh man, I didn't respond. I should respond to this person. Secondly, I create a sense of urgency by saying, hey, we've started to move forward. And then I've reiterated my interest in them, saying, but you know what? There's something great about you that I think merits further conversation. I'd love just to have a quick chat and maybe answer questions you have. The third email that I send out says final attempt to reach you. So if that person hasn't responded because maybe they've been busy or, you know what, I'll respond to this person later.
Yep.
I think when you say, hey, this is the last chance, you're going to get a bunch of people who go, oh, you know what, I should fall back. There's people who probably didn't see it. There's people who probably saw it and were interested, but for whatever reason haven't responded. Maybe they've been busy. That's going to motivate the rest of those people. In that one, I go, hey, I've sent you a few messages over the past couple of weeks, but I haven't heard back. I'm going to, at this point, assume that either you're not interested or you haven't seen them. If by chance you do have any interest in this, I'd still be open to talk to you. I'd love just to connect and maybe talk about what makes sense for your career. Feel free to give me a call when you get this. You don't even have to pitch the role. Just that third tap on the shoulder sometimes is enough.
Yeah.
And if you look at my inbox with the response rates from LinkedIn, you'd see about 40% of the people who respond to me respond to the first one, and then it's about 30-30 for the second one. So I've almost doubled the amount of people who reach back out to me just by sending a second and third message as opposed to only sending the first one.
Yeah. No, I think the follow-up is key. You have to try that multiple times because you're right. They do miss the email or they're busy or whatever reason. That follow-up is really important.
Totally. I mean, they might just be, things might have changed. They might be super happy at their job, the first one. Next thing you know, a week and a half later, their boss gives their notice. That's a big reason they're staying there.
Yep.
And they're like, oh, well, I don't want to stay here anymore. Things change all the time. I think in recruiting, timing is so important, and you want to give yourself as many chances to take advantage of good timing as possible. So that's why I send 3.
Yeah. How about phone sourcing? How much do you do that on a day-to-day basis? Yeah,
that depends on the amount of people I get back from my emails, and it depends on the roles. For example, I have a search right now that's a mechanical designer, and I'm having way better luck cold calling into companies and asking for people specifically than I am with emails. I just think as a group, they're not as invested in LinkedIn. They're not as invested in responding to those messages. But you can get them on the phone. They're not always thrilled that you're calling them at work, but that's just kind of, it just kind of is what it is.
So when you do call somebody at work, how do you kind of approach it that way? What's the first thing you say to them?
Yeah, I usually reference the fact that I've sent them an email. So I kind of turn it into a semi-warm call. It's not a cold call anymore, 100%. It's, hey, I don't know if you recognize my name, but I sent you a message on LinkedIn about 5 days ago. Did you happen to see that? They go, no, I didn't. And then I do a quick pitch. I introduce myself, and this is another thing that I learned from Lou Adler. I don't pitch the role really at all. I give them brief, hey, I've got a really exciting opportunity. You happen to be a great fit. I know this isn't a great time to talk to you, but when would be a good time for us to talk? I try to sell the conversation. So I try to get them on the phone. I try to figure out a time that makes sense for them. A lot of times I'll find another line that I use too is I use a Peter Lefkowitz line. I went down and did his recruiter training in Kansas City a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And what he uses, and I use this line all the time, is kind of a loaded question. It's at this stage in your career, would you be open to an opportunity that offers you growth or advancement? And if you think about that, how do you say no to that? Like, would you be open to something that made your life better? So most people say, well, I mean, yeah. If it may, and then I try to convert that into a conversation. So I try to be quick. I try to be cognizant of the fact that this is not a good time for them to talk, and I just try to sell an additional conversation. If they're interested in that additional conversation, then usually schedule that for after working hours, during lunch, or before work. Sometimes people close the door and they talk to me right now, which is even better. But that's kind of another conversation.
Those are the best calls to get. All right.
Yeah.
Any other tips in terms of just trying to engage a candidate who may otherwise have passed on the initial attempt from you or initial phone call?
It can be hard when someone, when they shut the door and they go, no, Ben, I do not want a job that's going to enrich my life further than what I already have. I try to leave the door open. I go, well, tell you what, I can appreciate that. You're happy at your job. That's great. Not everybody is as lucky as you. But here's what I will do. I'm going to send you a connection request on LinkedIn. If you change your mind, or if you just want to have a conversation where you can perhaps learn a little bit more about what you're passing on, I would still be very much so open to that. So I'm going to send you a LinkedIn request. My phone number is going to be on there. If you want to find out a little bit more, I'd still love to have a conversation with you. Depending how it goes as well, if they're just, no, Ben, I just took a new role. I'm super happy. There's no way I'm changing. I'd like to ask for referrals too. That's another big source for me. But yeah, I try to give them at least one more opening in, because sometimes people go, you know what? Maybe I am open to at least hearing about it. And that, that's a few more people who engage.
Gotcha. All right, a couple more questions for you. Your last 3 placements, where did you find them online? What source and what kind of job was it?
Yeah, so my last 3 placements, 2 were people I found on LinkedIn, and 1 was a referral from someone I reached out to and spoke with on LinkedIn, and they said, you know what, this isn't for me right now, but I happen to know a guy who would be good at this. So the last 3 roles, I filled a mechanical engineer, so mechanical design engineer, a project leader, and then a senior lead payroll position.
All right, very good. And last question for you, Ben. If you were meeting a new recruiter for the first time, or a new college grad getting into recruiting for the first time, what's your advice to that person?
I mean, I think the most important thing is they have to learn not to take rejection personally and just get on the phone. Sometimes, I notice that new recruiters, and it depends what the role is, right? If they're doing corporate recruiting, that's a whole different thing from headhunting. But if I was to talk to a headhunter who's, just getting a role, they're going to be running a first desk, I would tell them, get used to people saying no to you and not saying it necessarily nicely, and don't let it affect you. As soon as you hear that, just make the next call. Dial right away. That would be the first thing. I guess the second thing I would say is this is a worthwhile career, and you are changing people's lives. When you get someone a new job where they're going to be happier and they're going to be able to better provide for their family, you're making a measurable positive impact in somebody's life, and that's important. So what you do is important. So those are probably the 2 things I would say.
All right. Well, Ben White from Titus Talent, thanks for joining me today.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the RecTech Podcast. Follow me on Twitter at Chris Russell, or visit rectechmedia.com. There you can find the audio and links for this show on our blog. Thanks for listening, everyone.